Let's be honest, when you picture the White House, you probably think of power, history, maybe some grand ceremonies. But what if I told you its story doesn't start with any of that? Nope. It starts in a muddy field with a huge, messy argument about money. So how on earth did that happen? Well, that's what we're going to unpack today. On the one hand, you've got this grand, almost mythic idea of a presidential palace, a shining symbol for a brand new nation. But the reality? Oh, the reality in the beginning was a lot less glamorous. We are talking about a literal muddy field surrounded by woods with probably a few farm animals just wandering around. So yeah, that brings us to the big question. How did America manage to transform a simple patch of dirt into one of the most powerful and famous addresses in the entire world? Well, the answer is messy, it's surprising, and it all came down to one incredible high-stakes deal. To figure this out, we've got to jump back in time to 1792. I want you to picture this. America's very first president, George Washington, who, remember, used to be a land surveyor, is out in that field himself. He's got a hammer in his hand, and he is personally banging wooden stakes into the ground, marking the exact spot for what would become the president's house. You see, after winning the Revolutionary War, the United States was officially a country. Great news, right? Well, yes and no. They had this one massive, glaring problem. Every country needs a capital city, a home base for its government, and the brand new United States didn't have one. At first, they thought, hey, we've got an easy fix. Philadelphia. I mean, it was a big city, it's where the Declaration of Independence was signed, it seemed perfect. But oh man, one really, really bad day was about to prove that this plan had a huge and pretty dangerous flaw. So get this. The nation's leaders are in Philadelphia trying to run the country when a huge mob of angry, unpaid soldiers shows up. They completely surround the building, demanding their pay. The leaders are literally trapped inside. They call the governor of Pennsylvania for help, begging for protection, and he basically says, nope, not my problem, you're on your own. Can you imagine? Yeah, that whole incident, it was a giant wake-up call. The leaders suddenly realized they couldn't possibly have their capital in a city where a state governor could just leave them defenseless. The lesson was crystal clear. The capital had to be a special place, not part of any state. It needed to be on its own federal land where the government could actually protect itself. Okay, so new plan. They need a brand new city on its own special land. But how in the world do you decide where to put it? Well, this wasn't going to be decided by throwing a dart at a map. Oh no. The location was going to be hammered out in a huge, high-stakes negotiation that was all about one thing: money. At the absolute heart of this entire deal was the nation's massive war debt. I mean, winning a war is incredibly expensive. You're buying guns, food, uniforms, the whole shebang. And America had a giant bill to pay. But here's the kicker. Not every state owed the same amount. Let's think of it this way. Imagine the whole war was a giant pizza party. The northern states, where most of the fighting happened, ordered a ton of pizza. Their bill was enormous. The southern states, they ordered way less pizza, so their bill was much, much smaller. The problem was, the North couldn't pay its tab. This is where the big compromise comes in. The South went to the North with a deal. They said, okay, look, we'll help get the whole country to pay for your giant pizza bill if you agree to build the new capital city down here in the South. And the North, being completely desperate to pay its debts, agreed. It was a deal. And just like that, the location was set. Maryland and Virginia both agreed to donate a little chunk of their land right there on the Potomac River. They put those two pieces together to create a brand new federal district that belonged to everyone and no one state in particular. Okay, so the deal is done. They've got the land. Awesome. But, solving one huge problem just led to the next huge challenge. What should the most important house in this new city actually look like? And this kicked off a major debate between two very powerful figures. The city's designer, Pierre L'Enfant, he wanted a massive presidential palace, something that looked like it was fit for a European king. But the Secretary of State, Thomas Jefferson, pushed back. And he pushed back hard. He argued for a respectable, elegant home, not a palace. And Jefferson's argument was really simple, but so powerful. We just fought a war to get away from kings. The leader of this new republic should live in a home that reflected democratic values, not royal power. So, to settle it all, they held a public design contest. And here's a little historical secret for you. One of the designs was submitted completely anonymously, and historians are pretty darn sure it was Thomas Jefferson himself, trying to secretly win the argument with his own vision for the house. But in the end, neither L'Enfant's palace nor Jefferson's secret drawing won. President Washington himself made the final call, choosing a really elegant design by an Irish architect named James Hoban. Washington loved the plan, but he made two key requests. First, make the whole thing about 20% bigger, and second, add some fancy stone carvings to give it an extra special look. So, let's recap. They had the land, they had the deal, and now they had the design. All that was left was, well, probably the hardest part of all, turning those plans into an actual physical building. And this was no small task. This was a massive, difficult construction project that took a grand total of 8 full years. 8 years from the moment that first stone was laid to the day it was finally ready. And it's so important to recognize who built it. It was constructed by the hands of a remarkably diverse group of people. The workforce included enslaved African Americans who were rented from their owners, free African Americans, and even expert stone carvers who traveled all the way from Scotland to do the detailed carvings. And here's another surprising fact for you. The White House wasn't originally white. Nope. It was built from a light brown sandstone. But to protect that stone from cracking in the winter cold, they covered the entire building in a lime-based whitewash, which is what gave it that famous color right from the very beginning. But as the project finally neared its end, there was this really poignant twist in the story. After overseeing the entire project for years, George Washington passed away in 1799, just one single year before the house was finished. This meant John Adams would become the very first president to move in. And this brings us to one of the most famous pieces of American trivia out there. The one man who started it all, the man the city is literally named for, George Washington is the only U.S. president who never ever lived in the White House. From a muddy field and a messy political compromise, this building somehow rose to become a global symbol. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What would Washington and Jefferson and all those first builders, what would they think if they could see what their creation has become today?